There is a crucial truth many men overlook about what truly captures and holds a woman's attention. It isn't about showcasing wealth. It isn't about listing achievements. It isn't even about being the most entertaining or charismatic person in the room. What distinguishes men who genuinely spark a woman's interest from those who are merely tolerated is far more subtle and far more powerful. It's the ability to make her feel deeply recognized rather than simply noticed. It's knowing how to ask questions that move beyond the repetitive conversations she's tired of having. It's understanding that attraction grows through creating an environment where she feels safe enough to reveal who she really is. Before we go deeper into this, I want you to pause for a second and really think about your last few conversations with a woman you were genuinely interested in. Not just what you said, but how the interaction felt. Did it feel alive, like something meaningful was unfolding? Or did it feel like you were both just following a script you didn't even realize you were reading from? Because most men don't fail due to lack of effort. They fail because they're playing a game on the surface while the real connection is happening underneath in a place they never reach. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If your conversations feel predictable, she already knows where it's going. And once a woman can predict you, she stops feeling you. Now imagine something different. Imagine sitting across from her and instead of trying to impress her, you create a moment where she forgets everything else around her. A moment where she pauses, not because she doesn't know what to say, but because what you just asked made her feel something real. That's the shift. That's where attention turns into curiosity, and curiosity turns into emotional investment. And I want you to ask yourself honestly, when was the last time someone looked at you and asked something that made you feel truly understood? Not evaluated, not judged, understood. Because the moment you understand how powerful that feeling is, you begin to understand what women are actually craving beneath all the noise. My name is Emily Carter, host of the Female Game YouTube channel. And what I'm about to share with you isn't about tricks, lines, or manipulation. It's about understanding the deeper psychology of connection in a way most men never take the time to learn. Because when you understand this, something shifts. You stop chasing attention, and you start becoming the kind of presence people naturally move toward. Consider what most women experience every single day. They're seen constantly but rarely understood. People comment on their appearance, their style, their energy. They're complimented, approached, noticed. But here's the part most men miss. Being noticed is not the same as being seen. In fact, after a while, being constantly noticed without being understood becomes exhausting. It creates a quiet emotional fatigue. Because when every interaction feels the same, when every conversation follows the same shallow pattern, she begins to disconnect before the conversation even really starts. And this is exactly why most men get categorized so quickly. Not because they lack value, but because they communicate in a way that blends in. They ask the same safe questions. They share the same predictable stories. They try to present a polished version of themselves instead of creating space for something real to happen. And without realizing it, they become forgettable. Not because they are, but because their presence never creates a feeling worth remembering. But every once in a while, something different happens. She meets someone who doesn't rush to fill silence. Someone who doesn't try to impress her within the first few minutes. Someone who asks a question that makes her stop, think, and feel. That small pause. That moment where her mind shifts out of autopilot is where real intrigue begins. That's where emotional tension forms without pressure. That's where she becomes present in a way she didn't expect. You see, attraction operates on two levels at the same time, physical and psychological. And while most men focus almost entirely on the physical side, the psychological side is what creates depth, memory, and emotional pull. A woman doesn't just become attracted to how a man looks or what he has. She becomes drawn to how she feels in his presence, whether she feels safe expressing herself, whether she feels curious about him. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The brain is wired to remember emotional experiences, not information. So when a conversation makes her feel something meaningful, even if she can't fully articulate it, that feeling stays with her. It lingers. It replays later when she's alone, and that's when attraction deepens quietly without anything obvious happening on the surface. Think about that for a moment. It means the goal is not to say more. It's to say what matters, not to impress but to connect, not to perform, but to create space. And the most powerful way to do that is through the right questions. Not random questions, not forced ones, but intentional questions that open emotional doors she doesn't usually open with people. Because when you ask a powerful question, you're not just starting a conversation. You're creating an experience. You're signaling that you're present, aware, and genuinely interested in understanding her beyond the surface. And that's rare. Much rarer than confidence, rarer than humor, rarer than status. Now, let's talk about what usually happens instead. Most men approach conversations like they're presenting a version of themselves. They talk about what they do, what they've achieved, where they've been, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when that becomes the focus, the interaction turns into a subtle performance. And performance creates distance. And while you're trying to show her who you are, she's still wondering how it feels to be around you. And those are two very different things. I once worked with someone who couldn't understand why his conversations never led anywhere meaningful. He was successful, articulate, even funny at times, but every interaction felt like it ended the same way. Polite interest followed by quiet distance, and when we broke it down, the issue became clear. He was doing everything right on the surface, but nothing that created emotional depth. So I asked him to try something different. Instead of focusing on what to say about himself, I asked him to focus on what to discover about her. Not in a forced way, but in a curious, grounded way. The next time he met someone, he asked her a simple question, one she didn't expect, and something shifted immediately. The conversation slowed down. She opened up. She became more present, and afterward, she told him something that surprised him. She said, "I don't know what it is, but talking to you feels different." That's what you're learning here. Not a script, but a shift. Now, the 7 questions you're about to understand are not magic lines. They only work if your intention is real. If you ask them just to get a reaction, she'll feel it. But if you ask them because you genuinely want to understand her, something powerful happens. She relaxes, her guard lowers, and she begins to associate you with that feeling of being understood. The first question is simple on the surface but deeply revealing underneath. You ask her, "What's something you strongly believed a few years ago that you don't believe anymore?" And then you stop talking, because this question does something most questions don't. It invites reflection. It takes her out of the present moment and into her own personal evolution. It allows her to explore how she's changed, what she's learned, what life has shown her. And when someone talks about their growth, they naturally become more emotionally open. You might hear her talk about relationships that reshaped her perspective or beliefs she once held about herself, that she's outgrown, or even moments where life challenged her in ways she didn't expect. And as she speaks, something subtle happens. She's no longer just answering a question, she's sharing a piece of her journey. And here's where most men make a mistake. They interrupt, they relate it back to themselves too quickly. They break the emotional flow. But if you stay present, if you let her finish, if you allow silence to exist for just a few seconds after she speaks, she feels heard in a way she's not used to. That silence, it's not awkward, it's powerful. Now think about what that does. In a world where everyone is trying to be interesting, you become the one who makes her feel interesting, and that changes everything. Let me ask you something. How many people in your life actually listen to you without waiting for their turn to speak? Probably not many. And the same is true for her. So when you become that rare presence, even briefly, it leaves an impression that goes far beyond the conversation itself. The second question goes even deeper into emotional territory. You ask her, "When do you feel most like yourself?" This question bypasses surface-level identity completely. It doesn't ask what she does. It asks who she is when she's not trying to be anything for anyone. And that's a powerful place to explore. Her answer might be something simple, like quiet mornings with coffee, or being in nature, or creating something she loves. Or it might be something deeper, like being in meaningful conversations, or helping others, or feeling completely at peace with herself. And as she answers, something important happens. She begins to reconnect with that feeling, and because you're the one who brought her there, she subconsciously links that emotional state to you. That's how attraction builds quietly, not through force but through association. Now, here's where you take it a step further. Instead of jumping to the next question, you stay with her answer. You explore it gently. You might say, "What is it about that moment that makes you feel that way?" And suddenly, the conversation deepens even more. This is what most people never experience, a conversation that actually unfolds instead of just moving from topic to topic. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice something else. She starts asking you questions too, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. Because when someone feels seen, they naturally want to see you back. So now I want you to reflect again. Are your conversations creating this kind of experience? Or are they staying on the surface where nothing really sticks? Because in the next part, we're going to go even deeper into the remaining questions, the ones that unlock hidden desires, reveal emotional patterns, and create a level of connection most people never reach. And once you understand how to use them the right way, you won't just hold attention like you'll become unforgettable. Now here's where things begin to shift even more deeply, because once a woman starts opening up, once she begins to feel that sense of emotional safety and curiosity, the next step is not to rush forward. It's to guide the conversation into places she doesn't usually go with people. And this is where most men lose momentum. They either become too eager and break the rhythm, or they retreat back into safe surface-level topics because they don't know how to handle depth. But if you stay grounded here, if you stay calm and present, this is where connection transforms into something she actually feels. The third question is one of the most powerful ways to unlock that shift. You ask her, if nothing held you back, no fear, no money concerns, no judgment, what would you be doing right now? And when you ask this, something interesting happens almost immediately. There's a pause, not a confused pause, but a thoughtful one, because most people don't get asked this. Most people don't give themselves permission to even think this way. Life conditions them to be realistic, to stay within boundaries, to filter their desires before they even speak them out loud. But this question removes all of that. It creates a space where she can explore who she is without limitations. And when someone steps into that space, even for a moment, it feels freeing. She might tell you about a dream she never pursued, a passion she set aside, a version of her life that exists quietly in the background of her mind. And as she speaks, you'll notice a change in her energy. There's often more emotion, more expression, sometimes even a hint of vulnerability she doesn't usually show. And here the key: you don't interrupt that. You don't try to fix it. You don't turn it into advice. You simply hold space for it. Because what she's feeling in that moment isn't just excitement about a dream. It's emotional release. And when someone associates you with that kind of emotional freedom, it creates a powerful imprint. You become the person she felt safe enough to be real with. Let me give you a real scenario to make this clear. A woman once shared that she had always wanted to move to another country and start over, but she never did because she felt responsible for staying close to her family. Let me give you a real scenario to make this clear. A woman once shared that she had always wanted to move to another country and start over, but she never did because she felt responsible for staying close to her family. One man immediately says, "You should just go for it. Life is short." The first response shuts down the emotional depth by jumping into advice. The other simply says, "What do you think your life would feel like if you did?" The second keeps her in that reflective space and allows her to explore it further. And that's the difference between a conversation she forgets and one she replays later in her mind. Now think about this. How often do people actually feel heard when they talk about their dreams? Not judged, not redirected, not rushed, just heard. That's rare. The fourth question moves into something even more personal. You ask her, what kind of connection do you believe you truly deserve? This question goes straight into her beliefs about relationships, her sense of self-worth, and the pattern she may or may not even be fully aware of. And because of that, it often creates a deeper emotional response than she expects. She might speak with clarity, describing a relationship where she feels respected, understood, emotionally supported. Or she might hesitate, unsure of how to answer because part of her hasn't fully defined that yet. And both responses are meaningful because when someone hasn't clearly defined what they deserve, it often reflects past experiences that shape their expectations. Maybe they accepted less than they should have. Maybe they're still figuring out what healthy connection actually feels like. This is where trust begins to form. Not forced trust, but natural trust. The kind that builds when someone feels emotionally safe in your presence. And again, your role here is not to analyze her or correct her. It's to listen, to be present, to allow her to express something she may not usually say out loud. And here's something important to understand. When a woman shares something like this, she's not just talking, she's revealing a part of her internal world. And the way you respond to that determines whether she continues opening up or slowly closes off again. Now let's go further. The fifth question is where the interaction often becomes genuinely intimate. You ask her what's something you wish people understood about you, but they usually don't. She might tell you that people assume she's strong all the time, when in reality she feels overwhelmed more often than she shows, or that people see her as distant when she's actually just cautious about who she lets in, or maybe that she feels like she's always giving more than she receives, but doesn't know how to change that pattern. She might tell you that people assume she's strong all the time, when in reality she feels overwhelmed more often than she shows, or that people see her as distant when she's actually just cautious about who she lets in. Or maybe that she feels like she's always giving more than she receives, but doesn't know how to change that pattern. And this is where your presence matters more than anything you could possibly say. Because if you respond with distraction or try to lighten the moment too quickly, you break that connection. But if you stay with her, if you acknowledge what she said in a simple, genuine way, she feels seen. You might say something as simple as, "That makes a lot of sense," or, "I can see why you'd feel that way." And that's enough. You don't need to overcomplicate it because what she's really responding to is not your words, it's your presence. The sixth question takes her into her past, but in a way that highlights growth rather than regret. You ask her, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And as she shares this, you're not just learning about her past. You're understanding her values. You're seeing what matters to her, what she's learned, what she carries forward. This question is powerful because it naturally brings up lessons, experiences, and moments that shaped who she is today. And when people reflect on their past with awareness, they often reveal their deepest insights without even realizing it. She might talk about trusting herself more, speaking up sooner, walking away from situations that didn't serve her, or simply being kinder to herself during difficult times. And again, notice the pattern here. Each question is not random. Each one opens a different emotional door: growth, identity, desire, self-worth, vulnerability, reflection. And when these layers unfold naturally in a conversation, it creates a sense of depth that most people rarely experience. Now here's something subtle but important. At this point in the interaction, if you've been present, if you've listened well, if you've allowed space instead of filling it, she's already feeling something different about you. And this is where many men make another mistake. They try to capitalize on the moment too quickly. Instead, you stay steady. You let the connection breathe because attraction that builds slowly tends to last longer and feel stronger. Now, before we move to the final question, I want you to reflect again, not just on what you're hearing, but on how you would actually apply this. Because knowledge without application changes nothing. The next time you're in a conversation, instead of trying to think of something impressive to say, ask yourself a different question. What can I discover about her that most people never take the time to see? That one shift alone will change how you show up. And in the final part, we're going to bring everything together with the last question and the one that reveals her core motivations, her sense of freedom, and what truly drives her beneath everything else. Now, we arrive at the final question. And in many ways, this is the one that ties everything together. You ask her, what does freedom mean to you personally? And when you ask this, something shifts again, not on the surface, but internally. Because freedom is not just a concept, it's a feeling, it's a value. It's something people move toward or protect often without even realizing it consciously. And when you ask this, something shifts again, not on the surface, but internally. Because freedom is not just a concept, it's a feeling, it's a value, it's something people move toward or protect, often without even realizing it consciously. Her answer might be simple at first. She might say, freedom is the ability to do what she wants when she wants. But if you stay with it, if you gently explore it, it becomes much more revealing. Freedom might mean emotional peace. It might mean not having to prove herself to anyone. It might mean independence or the ability to express herself fully without fear of judgment. Now here's where everything you've learned begins to connect. Each of these questions was never just about getting answers. They were about creating an emotional experience, a moment where she feels safe enough to reflect, to express, to reveal parts of herself that don't come out in everyday conversations. And when you guide someone through that experience with calm presence and genuine curiosity, something powerful happens. She doesn't just remember what you said, she remembers how she felt while talking to you. Let's pause here for a second, because this is important. Think about the people you feel most connected to in your own life. It's not because they impressed you the most. It's because at some point they made you feel understood. They created a space where you didn't have to filter yourself. And that feeling is rare. Now imagine being that person for someone else. Not by trying to be perfect, but by being present, by listening without rushing, by asking questions that actually matter. This is where attraction quietly transforms into something deeper. Not loud, not obvious, but steady and real. But here's the part most men still struggle with. Knowing what to ask is one thing. Knowing how to carry the conversation afterward is what truly makes the difference. Because these questions are not a checklist. They're not meant to be asked one after another like an interview. That would feel forced, unnatural, and she would sense it immediately. Instead, think of them as doorways. You open one, you step inside, and you stay there for a while. You explore it. You let the conversation unfold naturally, and only when it feels right, you move to another. For example, if she shares something meaningful about when she feels most like yourself, you don't immediately jump to the next question. You stay with it. You might ask, what changed for you that helped you realize that? Or, do you feel like you get enough of that in your life right now? Now, the conversation is no longer structured, it's alive. And here's something subtle but powerful. When you genuinely listen, when you respond thoughtfully, she begins to feel something that goes beyond attraction. She feels respected. She feels valued. And those emotions create a kind of connection that doesn't fade quickly. Let me give you another real-life scenario. A woman once described meeting someone who didn't try to impress her at all. He wasn't overly talkative. He didn't dominate the conversation, and he didn't try to steer things in a specific direction, but he asked her one question that stayed with her long after they parted ways. And more importantly, he listened to her answer in a way that made her feel like what she was saying actually mattered. Days later, she found herself thinking about him, not because of something obvious but because of how different that interaction felt. And that's the key word here, felt, because attraction that is based only on what is seen fades quickly. But attraction that is rooted in how someone feels in your presence tends to linger. It grows quietly. It builds over time. Now, I want to challenge you with something. The next time you're in a conversation, resist the urge to fill every silence. Resist the urge to prove yourself. Instead, focus on creating space, because in that space, something real has the opportunity to emerge. And I know what some of you might be thinking. What if it gets awkward? But here's the truth. Silence only feels awkward when you're uncomfortable with it. When you're grounded, when you're present, silence becomes part of the connection. It allows emotions to settle. It gives meaning to what was just said. So instead of fearing silence, learn to use it. Now let's talk about something equally important. Intention. Because everything you've learned here only works if your intention is genuine. If you're asking these questions just to get a reaction to create attraction artificially, she will feel it. Maybe not consciously, but emotionally. And when that happens, the connection doesn't deepen. It weakens. But when your intention is to truly understand her, to see her beyond the surface, everything changes. Your tone softens. Your presence becomes more grounded, and the interaction feels natural instead of calculated. This is why authenticity is not just important, it's essential. And here's something that might surprise you. When you approach conversations this way, you don't just become more attractive, you also start filtering the kind of connections you allow into your life. Because as you listen more deeply, you begin to recognize who aligns with you and who doesn't. So, this isn't just about making her interested in you. It's also about understanding whether she's someone you genuinely connect with. Now, let's bring this back to you for a moment. Think about how you usually show up in conversations. Are you trying to be liked, or are you trying to understand? Are you focused on what to say next, or are you actually listening to what's being said? Because the shift from performing to connecting is what changes everything. And if you apply this consistently, something interesting happens. You stop feeling pressure. You stop overthinking every word. You become more relaxed, more present, more confident. Not because you're trying to be, but because you're no longer focused on proving anything. That's real confidence. Now, I want to leave you, with a simple exercise you can start using immediately. The next 3 conversations you have, whether it's with someone new or someone you already know, choose just one of these questions. Not all 7, just one. And ask it at the right moment. Then do something most people never do. Listen fully. Don't interrupt. Don't rush. Don't turn it back to yourself too quickly. Just listen. And afterward, reflect on what changed. Did the conversation feel deeper? Did the other person open up more? Did you feel more present? Because once you experience that shift for yourself, you won't need to force anything anymore. It will become natural. Now, I'm curious which of these questions stood out to you the most. Which one do you feel would create the biggest shift in your conversations? Let me know in the comments because I read them and I genuinely want to hear your perspective. And if you've ever had a conversation where someone made you feel truly understood, share that too. Because those moments matter more than most people realize. If this gave you a new way of seeing connection and attraction, make sure you like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep exploring the deeper psychology behind relationships, attraction, and human behavior in a way that actually makes a difference in your life. And remember this, women are not drawn to the loudest man in the room or the one trying the hardest to impress them. They clear throat are drawn to the man who makes them feel something real, the one who sees them beyond the surface, the one who understands without needing to prove anything. When your presence creates that kind of experience, you don't just hold attention, you leave a lasting impression.